Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 30th of July, 2025. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Charles Malet, and I'm joined by a number of other presenters by live link today. We have Vanessa Beeley from Lebanon, Carl Czar from Bali, Mike Robinson from Northern Ireland, and Sandi Adams from Somerset. Now, because of that, we've got a very full programme, and we'll be covering topics ranging from the battle between online safety and free speech to net zero restrictions in Oxford, adherence to the gunning principles, air turbulence, as well as the border clashes in Southeast Asia, and a number of other topics to boot. But bearing in mind the statements that have been coming out from Downing Street recently, we'll be beginning the programme by going to Vanessa for an update on the situation in and around Gaza.
Yeah, so sadly, the people of Gaza are still being deliberately starved, not only, of course, by Israel, but by the international community that is not stepping up to actually prevent what is happening. And I just want to show one photo of the hundreds that are flooding social media of children starving of what Western media is describing as malnutrition, as if this is some kind of unrelated syndrome, nothing to do with Israel. And what I want to show now is an interview actually with an Israeli social media channel with a member of the mercenary Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, Mossad linked, that has been collaborating with the Israeli forces occupying Gaza to target the crowds of people coming to try and secure some kind of aid for their family at the 4 distribution centers that now exist in Gaza. So let's just play this section of the interview.
And when he got there, he thanked us for the remnants and the small crumbs that he got. And he sets them down on the ground, because I was kneeling at this point, and he sets his food down, and he places his hands on my face, on the side of my face, on my cheeks, these frail, skeleton, emaciated hands, dirty. And he puts them on my face, and he kissed me. He kissed me, and he said, "Thank you," in English. "Thank you." And he collected his items, and he walked back to the group. And then he was shot at with pepper spray, and tear gas, and stun grenades, and bullets shot at his feet and in the air. And he runs away, scared. And the IDF were shooting at the crowd. So they're shooting to control the population that's along the Marag corridor. And as they're doing that, they're shooting into this crowd. And Palestinian civilians, human beings, are dropping to the ground.
Now, bear in mind, this guy supports Israel, and even he is unable to remain silent when he's witnessed the dehumanization of Palestinian children, women, whole families. Then what we're seeing right now is sort of a political cosmetic move by a number of countries led by France, but including Saudi Arabia, seeking support for a declaration on a 2-state solution between Israel and Palestinians. Of course, this is ridiculously late after the genocide began in earnest on October the 7th, and the 2-state solution is a completely non-viable solution, always has been. Even the 1936 commission deemed it as such. And what has it actually done? What it's done is to generate moves by the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, that have recently voted 71-13 for a non-binding motion to annex the entire West Bank. And of course, this is basically what many members of Netanyahu's administration have been talking about or calling for since the beginning of the genocide of Palestinians that began back on October the 7th, but of course began back in 1917. And then this is an interview on Hebrew TV with Ben-Gvir, who's the Minister for National Security, ironically. So let's have a look at what he's saying once France has called for the recognition of a Palestinian state.
די, נגמר, שום משא ומתן, שום איזושהי תקווה למשא ומתן, להיכנס בכל הכוח, בעצימות מלאה, מלא מלא, להתחיל, לצערי, מצליחים להם עכשיו סיוע הומניטרי, זה טעות מאוד מאוד גדולה, אבל להתחיל לכבוש שטח, אחרי שגם את התוחמת הצפונית, גם עוד שטחים, לעצר את הצעדים, מלחמה עד הסוף, יש 20,000 חמאסניקים חמושים, אני מצפה מצה"ל שיגיע אליהם, עשינו עבודה מצוינת באיראן, אפשר לעשות את זה, ועידוד הגירה. עידוד.
So as always, when the West starts calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state, we actually see an increase in the ethnic cleansing and genocidal tendencies of the Israeli administration. Then we have the fake claims by Israel of allowing humanitarian aid, and this is from suppressed news, but it's all over the media and social media. 10 trucks entered the Gaza Strip today. Their contents were completely seized. This is the same number that entered during the previous 2 days. So this was the 27th of July without any tactical truce or media hype. So basically, rather than actually allowing the humanitarian aid in, Israel is inspecting it and then turning it away. UAE has been running a propaganda campaign to show its trucks entering Gaza, but what has actually happened? If we look again on social media, multiple reports, empty trucks bearing the UAE flag enter Gaza, coinciding with Israel's announcement that it would allow aid in. The trucks were empty. UAE claimed that it was bringing equipment in. I'm not quite sure what equipment would be useful to a starving population. And then finally, let's see Keir Starmer stammer his way through a statement on recognizing Palestinian statehood. Very late again, he had pressure put on him by Macron, by the French to do so. But let's have a look at what he actually says.
In relation to the two-state solution and the recognition of Palestine, this has been long-standing Labour Party policy. It was in our manifesto. We talked about the right of the Palestinians to recognition, and we've always said that would be part of the process, and that it would be an important part of the point that we thought it would have maximum impact. It's driven today by two things. Firstly, the context in the intolerable situation in Gaza, which is getting worse by the day, but also because of the concern that the very possibility of a two-state solution is reducing, and therefore it is very important to be seen in that context as a very important contribution to what I hope will be an alleviation of the situation on the ground, because I'm acutely aware that what needs to happen urgently is that aid into Gaza at speed and at volume.
At speed and at volume, of course, we're not seeing that. And there was Keir Starmer oozing sincerity about a Palestinian state. And then finally, I want to also draw attention, although I lay the majority of the blame at the door of Western regimes that are, of course, supporting the Zionist entity. However, I'm disappointed to see that a BRICS member state leader, President Putin, had a call with Netanyahu yesterday. He discussed Syria and Iran in a phone call, but no mention of stopping the genocide against Palestinians.
Vanessa, thanks very much. A complicated picture, and there's evidently a huge amount more to come out on this. And I'm glad to say that we've got another report from you later on in the programme. But thanks very much indeed for that for now. Now, today, as I say, it's the 30th of July, and yesterday, the 29th, marked a year since the events in Southport, for which Axel Rudikabana was convicted, and which the government has made continued use of in order to justify the Online Safety Act 2023 coming into effect. The central theme of government communications regarding this act has been the protection of children from harmful content online, which is really to willfully obfuscate the very many oppressive and disproportionate provisions which are contained within it. And the other nut with which the online safety sledgehammer is said to crack is that of misinformation, which is described as being spread on social media, leading to violent protest. Recent events in Epping appear to have been agitated by police in order that the Online Safety Act can be further justified, and indeed that the case can be made for digital ID in order to maintain maximum border security. Now, for context on this, please see our censored section shown on screen. Brian was speaking on Monday's news about a plan to create a new police unit with a remit for monitoring social media for what may lead to unrest and other sorts of problems. This followed a correspondence between Karen Bradley, the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and Diana Johnson, the Minister for Policing and Crime. On the 1st of July, Bradley wrote to Johnson inquiring about government plans to gather open source intelligence from social media, end quote. And in her reply, Diana Johnson said that she's considering recommendations, which of course were made by the committee itself, to stand up what's been called a National Internet Intelligence Investigations Team, which will form part of the National Police Coordination Centre, which is situated at the heart of Westminster. Oddly enough, its offices are at 50 Broadway, which covers the site previously known as 54 Broadway, which was a former headquarters of the Secret Intelligence Service. But that's by the by. Johnson went on to say that this will monitor social media intelligence and advise on its use to inform local operational police decision-making, end quote. Given that this will be coordinated from the seat of political power in the country, it seems extraordinarily unlikely that it will not be used to interfere with the operational independence of police, but also because the NPOCC is set up as a, quote, central point for mobilisation of mutual aid across forces. Diana Johnson's letter also makes reference to the Online Safety Act, and of course she toes the party line in that she ensures she only mentions protecting children rather than the many oppressive measures which are set out by the Act. Now, when the subject of censorship came up during yet another awkward press conference with Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, this time at Turnberry, Trump's own golf course, Starmer walked the same line. The American was asked about having his Truth Social platform censored in the UK, and this was how the response was handled.
There are new powers here to censor your site, state-mandated powers.
To censor my site?
To censor your site and Twitter
Truth?
and Facebook. Truth. Is that okay?
Well, I don't think he's going to censor my site because I say only good things. Will you please uncensor my site?
Yeah, we're not censoring anyone. We've got some measures which are there to protect children, in particular from sites like suicide sites. We've had too many cases in the United Kingdom of young children taking their own lives, and when you look through their social media, they've been accessing sites which talk about suicide and encouraging, if you like, children down that road, and that is what we want to stop. There's nothing about censoring free speech.
But that treats all adults like children.
This country is the proud.
But that can treat all adults like children.
Free speech in this country has been for a very long time. We're very, very proud of it. We will protect it forever. But at the same time, I personally feel very strongly that we should protect our young teenagers, and that's what it usually is, from things like suicide sites. I don't see that as a free speech issue. I see that as a child protection issue.
We actually passed a bill in Congress, headed up by my wife, actually, which was to pull bad stuff out having to do with children, because it is a problem. But I cannot imagine him censoring Truth Social. This is more of a very political, and it's been a very big success.
It's not going to happen.
And I only say good things about him and his country, so if they censor me, you're making a mistake.
So all a bit of a joke as far as they're concerned, and even the bits that are not funny are really only concerning children. And I would say this is a distortion, and there is some indication of the public awareness of this thanks to a petition which has been started by Alex Bainham, running till October of this year, and it requests that the Online Safety Act be repealed. It's now attracted over 420,000 signatures, and there'll be a link in the show notes. The government has already responded with a lengthy statement crafted with the apparent intent to obfuscate, and of course the response is predicated on preventing harm to children. They say that they have no plans to repeal the Act and that the measures taken by Ofcom are proportionate, which is really almost all you need to know, and certainly nowhere near the truth. the specific point made by Alex Bainham is that what is described as user-to-user content is subject to the provisions of the Act, forcing the host of any platform to moderate, in a very active sense, all traffic on that site, something which is plainly an untenable burden for the smaller operators. Now, if this sounds confusing, it would be the equivalent of making the landlord of a pub responsible for every single conversation which took place in that pub, something which, of course, has never been suggested. Now, just like Diana Johnson, the government response hangs its hat on prevention of harm to children and ignores the very many ways in which the Act interferes with free speech. What the petition has also done, though, is to create a bandwagon for opportunists to jump on, most notably the Reform Party. Having said absolutely nothing about censorship in the UK, Reform are now reverse engineering their position in order to try to ride the crest of this particular wave. Nigel Farage has said that Reform will repeal the Act, and here is a piece by Zia Yusuf written on the same subject in The Telegraph, a blatant attempt to wrestle ownership of the repeal petition. On the subject of seizing a moment, though, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana appear to be running the largest political party in the country already, which, in addition to the petition response, could be considered as a barometer of resistance to the Starmer regime. It's called Your Party, and it claims to have over 500,000 members, which would mean that it already dwarfs all of the other parties. And as they say, the system is rigged, and they're campaigning on a free and independent Palestine ticket. So it should be expected that they gain a lot more traction over the coming months. And with the recent prescription of Palestine action and the raft of unwarranted arrests last year, there is no doubt that the link between censorship and sponsorship of genocide in the Middle East, something that is being covered many times by UK columns. So we'll certainly be following up on that particular story. Now, what we're going to do in a minute is go over to Bali, but first of all, we're going to be considering a story that's been pushed off the front pages of the news by the earthquake on the Kamchatka Peninsula, and of course that is the situation on the border between Thailand and Cambodia, which has been highly volatile over the past week, with both civilians and soldiers being killed, and there's now confused reporting on the state of the ceasefire. So I'm pleased to welcome Carl Czar to the programme. Carl, obviously I've given a very bland summary of what has been going on. Can you just give a bit more detail, as you see it, into what has actually happened? Carl, we can't hear you at the moment.
Okay, I just unmuted myself.
Okay, no
it's
worries.
Always okay
You're back on.
It's always okay to blame the French in all situations, and in this case, you will be correct, because what happened between Thailand and Cambodia is a case of legacy colonial borders driving the dispute between modern nation states. And the particular dispute centers around a collection of ancient Hindu temples left by the ancient Khmer Empire. For people who are not aware, Khmer, the Khmer is an ethnic name for Cambodians. And the ancient Khmer Empire used to cover much of Southeast Asia, including modern Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, South Vietnam. But as Mongol conquest of China happened, a lot of the Thai-speaking people were driven out of southern China, migrating to Southeast Asia, and this coincided with the decline of Khmer Empire. The Thai-speaking people then they founded their own state, and this gave rise to the state of Siam and later the modern state of Thailand. And before the Europeans came to Southeast Asia, Siam was a quite powerful state. It actually managed to subjugate Cambodia and turn it into a feudal overlord-vassal relationship. But Cambodia still maintained its independence, and then entered the French in the 19th century. And French established a colony over what they call French Indochina, which covers Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and you left a case with Thailand, which has been sandwiched between French Indochina on the east and the British Myanmar on the west. And Siam desperately tried to maintain its independence. So to do so, they had to give up a lot of territorial concession to the French. One thing they had to give up is their overlord relationship to Cambodia. And France said, okay, recognize that Cambodia is our territory now. We'll give you a couple provinces, as consolation prize. But then French reneged a couple years later, said, okay, well, actually, we're kidding. We're taking back those provinces. And then France further proposed, let's demarcate our border according to the so-called watershed principle. Look at those natural mountains. We'll make the perfect natural border. Thailand had no choice but to accept this because France was much stronger power. But when French authority finally start to survey the map, they decide to unilaterally alter the actual border. They say, okay, these sites are ancient Khmer Hindu temples. That's important cultural heritage to the Cambodian people. So we have to include that in our map. And they did it without informing the Thailand side. And, Thai was not very happy about it. When they finally find out what's going on, but the Europeans told the Thailand, sorry, it took you 20 years to complain. That means for 20 years you recognize France's possession of this territory. And then during the World War II, Thailand actually joined the Imperial Japanese in order to recover this disputed territory from France. But they have to, when the tide turned against the Japanese, Thailand had to give that territory back to not get on the Allies' bad side so they don't be labeled as a co-belligerent. But when France get defeated by the Vietnamese in the Dien Bien Phu, and as a result of the 1954 Geneva Convention, French troops had to leave French Indochina, including Cambodia. Thailand took that opportunity to occupy the disputed territory. And then Cambodia took Thailand to court, to the International Court of Justice in 1962, which ruled those temples belonged to Cambodia, but the court never ruled whether the land around the temple belonged to Cambodia. So the dispute went on. And then in 2008, the dispute flared up, and there was a border skirmish because Cambodia applied for UNESCO heritage site status for this Priya Vihir temple, and Thailand objected. That led to the border clash. Then later in 2011, Cambodia side filed another petition to International Court of Justice to ask for ruling around the land around the temple. And to another fresh round of clash, the ICJ actually ruled that, yes, those land around the temple should also go to Cambodia. But Thailand was not happy about this, and this led to the latest fresh round of fighting in May. And as a result of May fighting, the Thai Prime Minister actually made a phone call to the Cambodian leadership, tried to calm things down a little bit. But then the audio tape was leaked, and you raised a huge uproar in Thailand because in the phone call, she called the leader of Cambodia, Hun Sen, uncle, and said, "We're sorry. We don't mean for this to happen. It's a Thai general that made a mistake. I will fix this." And this audio recording caused a huge uproar in Thailand because they feel she was being unpatriotic. She's been, too nice to the enemy. And so that led to the Thai Supreme Court to actually suspend the Thai Prime Minister. So right now she's suspended. Now they have an acting Prime Minister. And they're going to make a final ruling on whether she can stay on as a Thai Prime Minister now. And at this critical juncture, the conflict broke out again. And then we saw this is the most deadliest conflict of this border dispute since it started 1 century ago. And this obviously is very concerning for all the countries involved, especially in ASEAN and China as well, because China has a lot of investment in both Thailand and Cambodia. What happened, you got Donald Trump, who is desperate for his Nobel Peace Prize, also got involved by threatening to level tariff on both nations if they don't come to set down. So now we have a ASEAN brokered ceasefire by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar, and both sides agreed to have the ceasefire on Monday, midnight Monday, but as of right now, Thailand is accusing Cambodia of violating the ceasefire twice. Cambodia denies it. They invite international observers. And the two-side defense minister are actually going to meet again next week on Monday to discuss this border dispute issue. But I don't expect the border to blow up into a general war because, this conflict, we have seen this conflict happen before. It's a border skirmish. There's no reason the two countries should really fight a war over this. We're talking about very sliver piece of land in like very remote area with tropical jungles. And what more likely was there's some behind the scene political horse trading that it's not, might not become clear much later because, on the Thai side, obviously, the Thai military is not very happy with their prime minister. They're trying to get rid of her. And on the Cambodian side, Cambodia just have a leadership transition. Hun Sen, who had been ruling Cambodia since 1980s, is now giving the top post to his son, Hu Manet, who does not have the experience or the prestige yet. So this is an opportunity for him to show himself as a tough leader who can defend Cambodian sovereignty and national honor. And so this is very likely both sides will make any meaningful concessions in the border dispute. But what most likely scenario is this will be another frozen conflict. And hopefully both sides will go back to do what's actually most important. The top priority for both countries is actually investing in infrastructure, education, and quality life for their citizens. There's really no need for these two countries to be engaging a war right now. The two countries are very similar cultural, religion. And in fact, at the disputed border, on both sides, they're essentially the same people. On the Thailand side, the people who live there are ethnic Khmer, who are the same ethnic stock as the Cambodians on the other side. So let's hope the ceasefire lasts. We'll have to follow the story very closely in the coming weeks.
Yeah, Carl, I mean, as you say, given that it's been going on for such a long time, it seems reasonable to wonder who would be benefiting from the militarization both sides of the border. And of course, one wonders to what extent the creation of the conflict in the first place could have been deliberate. Unfortunately, we don't have time to cover that now, but perhaps we can move on and discuss that a little bit in extra. But thank you very much indeed. That was very comprehensive, and I think will have given a huge insight to the audience. Now, we're going to move on to Oxford, a frequent hotbed of controversy surrounding net zero. It's been the victim or perhaps host of a number of schemes which have gone down variously very well and very badly with the people that live there. So we're going to go to Sandi now for an update on the way that she sees things in Oxford.
Thank you, Charles. Well, as if Oxford haven't been under the cosh for the last 2 years or so with the low traffic neighbourhood restrictions since, I think, February 2023, which is part of the 15-minute city traffic filters plan. These filters will now be in place by 2026, they've announced, and this was delayed by renovations to the railway station. So in the interim, Oxford City Council have decided to impose a temporary daily £5 congestion charge, and this has been put in place. Now, this hasn't gone down well, obviously, with the people there. It means that the residents must apply for a 100-day annual pass, while Oxfordshire residents just get a 25-day pass. That's the wider Oxfordshire residents just get a 25-day pass to avoid a £60 fine. And once your quota is used, a daily payment of £5 is required. This will impact businesses around Oxford even more than it has in the last 2 years. And this is what people are fearing. It's really causing a lot of poverty as people will choose to go elsewhere. It's a final nail in the coffin for business owners. And that's the point. Small and medium-sized businesses, SMEs, have to go for the fulfilment of the corporate technocratic takeover of the UK. And this sudden announcement was made only 8 weeks ago, stating that the congestion was extensive and that bus companies complained about the length of journeys. People had only 6 weeks to respond to this consultation, which ran from the 23rd of July to the 3rd of August, which it will finish on the 3rd of August, overlapping with school holidays when many people are away. Now, I've got a quote here from Councillor Saj Malik, and he said, if the council want to cut congestion, all they have to do is take out the low traffic neighbourhoods, the LTNs. They've manufactured this, it's a manufactured thing. They've manufactured this extra traffic themselves and caused journey times to be slower. So let's take a look at the campaign flyer. So access to the railway station and shopping centre will require a daily charge of £5. Key workers, self-employed people, teachers, doctors, nurses and hospital staff are not exempt. I mean, it's a university town and there's 2 big hospitals. Parents of school-aged children will be greatly impacted when driving their children to and from school. There's no exemption for electric cars, strangely. So will it be temporary? These restrictions could increase in the future and change to include commercial vehicles. In order to get an exemption, self-employed drivers will have to get business insurance on their cars. That's really costly. And people who look after the elderly relatives will only get an exemption if they fill in details of their parents' or their relatives' health data via a registered GP, where normally they would just go and look after their parents. So, there's a bit of a data mining issue here, in my opinion. Ironically, it's clear that the congestion is due to the low traffic neighbourhoods that have been in place for over 2 years, and it's causing mayhem and increased traffic around the ring road. As Saj Malik said, it's a manufactured problem, a classic case of problem, reaction, solution. Now, this consultation ends on the 3rd of August, and over 12,000 people have already signed the consultation, the application to stop it. So if you live in Oxfordshire, do sign it, but obviously only if you live in Oxfordshire. Now, I'm pretty sure that due to the short consultation in a holiday period, this could be overturned under the gunning principles, and I'll be speaking about those later on. Now, this is happening everywhere. It's an assault on the British people. Independent businesses are buckling under the strain of unnecessary climate policy. And for example, there's a shop called Marcus. It's a business in Hotwells of Bristol. This is happening all over the place, trading in outdoors equipment for over 60 years, and it's set to close. Their business, having got through COVID, they just can't continue under the clean air zone that's been imposed in Bristol. And these clean air restrictions will be putting people off coming in. So they'll be closing their doors, and it's a very sad thing. This really does seem to be an assault on the people of the UK. And, what do you think, Charles?
Well, Sandi, thanks very much. I think I was interested in the suggestion that the traffic had been created. Of course, that puts one in mind of what happened in London when the original congestion charge was introduced, because Ken Livingstone was certainly accused then of extending the times of traffic lights and then coinciding the start of the congestion charge with the beginning of the school half term in order to make it look like it had worked and that there was no traffic. So I think the cynicism required to create such a scheme that requires manipulation like this is something that really should be seen through. I mean, in terms of sort of campaigning in and around Oxford, what sense do you get of the activity that's going on?
Well, I think people are beginning to really get out and campaign against this. And I think the tide is turning. I mean, there's certainly been changes, and I'll mention this at the end of the show, because there are some wins happening where in certain areas these restrictions are being lifted, particularly the charges on people. And that's very important. I mean, sometimes the actual clean air bans are still there, but the charges, the fines are being lifted. So I think that's a partial win, and I think we need to hang on to those. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sandi, thank you very much. And as you say, you will be dealing with the gunning principles, which is very important, later on in the programme. Now, if you're new to UK Column, you may not know, but we are funded exclusively by our members and indeed the donations that come in from members and viewers. So if you'd like to consider joining UK Column as a member, we would be absolutely delighted. The front page of the website shows you with a large click here button exactly how you can do that, and it is what keeps us going. So we would be very pleased to have you on board. Now, as far as interviews go, tomorrow I'm pleased to say that we've got an interview with Morgoth, who, if you haven't heard of Morgoth, he is an online commentator, effectively providing intellectual commentary on the state of the country. And this specific conversation is with Ben Rubin, and it's based on a 1942 essay that George Orwell wrote entitled England, Your England. And he and Ben are looking at the way in which the current state of the United Kingdom relates to what Orwell was writing back in the 1940s. So that's at 1 o'clock tomorrow, Thursday. Please do tune in for that. Now, this evening, the German Warfare Programme is with John Loughlin, and that will be very interesting. John himself, a presenter and interviewer who has an awful lot to contribute in terms of his opinions and expertise. So please do tune into that. And then as far as events are concerned, I must remind you again that Hope Freedom Music Festival will be over the August bank holiday weekend between the 22nd and the 25th. And also for those of you who are members and will be joining for Extra, I'm very pleased to say that we have Katy-Jo Murfin, who's running the event, joining us for Extra. So please do come back for Extra to find out all about the festival itself if you haven't yet got your ticket. Now, and on the subject of tickets, another reminder that our tickets for our next On Location event in York, which is going to be on Saturday, the 18th of October of this year, went on sale on Monday to great fanfare and indeed were very well received. So the message I have to add to this slide is that tickets are selling fast. So please do get yours. I mean, I think having done a couple of these things now over the last year, there's absolutely no substitute for being in the same place with other people and sharing that information, having those conversations, and indeed listening to a range of speakers who really do know what they're talking about. Of course, they are to be announced, so we're going to keep the excitement building on that. I should also remind you that if for any reason you're unable to get to York, there are live stream tickets available and they are selling on the website now. And we are so keen to promote this that actually Kenny has devised a small video here showing you how to go about the process of getting a ticket by going to shop.ukcolumn.org. So please do get amongst it, but I wasn't joking about the tickets selling fast. They really are. We've sold over a third already and it only went on sale on Monday. So please get to it and make sure that we're not going to miss out on seeing you in October. Now, that takes us back to Vanessa. And as I said at the start of the programme, we were going to have time to have more input from Vanessa on the situation in Gaza. So Vanessa, we'll go back to you now.
Yeah, well, it's just a continuation of the rank hypocrisy from the supporters of Israel in the West, and this was in the last 11 hours aboard Air Force One. Trump says Israel will preside over U.S. aid distribution in Gaza after the disaster of sending in American mercenaries who were filmed actually taking part in the shooting of Palestinians trying to get to the aid centers. So what does he actually say? He suggested that Israel will now run the food distribution centers, a move that critics say would further entrench the Israeli occupation and endanger the safety of aid seekers. Well, that's a very euphemistic statement. Speaking to reporters aboard his presidential jet, Trump stressed the Israeli talking point that Hamas steals food assistance distributed in Gaza, a claim that has been denied, and United Nations officials. So this is how Zionist Hasbara or propaganda works. It just simply keeps repeating itself until it exhausts the evidence that is piling up to discredit it. And here is a report in Reuters in the last few days about the US aid analysis. Of course, US aid is the sector or the outreach agency for the American intelligence agencies that Trump has very recently also shut down. It does lead to speculation that perhaps they're getting their own back. But basically, their analysis found no evidence of massive Hamas theft of Gaza aid. And let's see again what they say and who was involved in the investigation. It was conducted by the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, which was the largest funder of assistance to Gaza before the Trump administration froze all US foreign aid in January, terminating thousands of programs. It has also begun dismantling US aid, as I said, whose functions have been folded into the State Department. Again, a very interesting way of saying exactly what they are. The analysis found that at least 44 of the 156 incidents where aid supplies were reported stolen or lost were either directly or indirectly due to Israeli military action, according to the briefing slides. And again, we've had great fanfare over the fact that airdrops have returned. And this is a report almost immediately by Euromed Human Rights Monitor. Gaza, the airdrops are humiliating and a tool of starvation. Only the opening of the land corridors, which of course the main one is through the Rafah border connecting with Egypt, which has been closed since October the 7th. And within the article itself, they point out that the airdrop of aid into the Gaza Strip is yet another act of humiliation and degradation against Palestinians. It endangers the civilians crowded into less than 15% of the enclave and serves a graver purpose, which is enabling Israel's policy of mass starvation, deliberately used as a tool of genocide in its systematic effort to eliminate Palestinians in Gaza. And there's been a video circulating of a little boy explaining, as he's trying to reach one of the aid drops, that they've been dropped into an area that is actually a militarized area. So it's infested by the Israeli troops and impossible for the people to enter safely. And finally, I really wanted to address something that I'm constantly coming up against when I'm discussing what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And I'm told, well, there are good Israelis. There are Israelis, surely, that are opposed to the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians or the extermination of Palestinian presence on their own land, which has been ongoing, as I said before, since 1917 and the giving of the territory to Rothschilds with the Balfour Treaty. It's not a treaty, sorry. The Balfour Treaty. And I found this morning. It's a young activist. I haven't yet been able to locate her actual channel, but this came to me through Eyes on Palestine on Telegram. And I just want to play this to push back a little bit against those that claim not all Israelis are behind what is happening in Gaza. So let's just play her video.
Every day I realize how many people were not taught that lying is bad as a child. This is from an Israeli newspaper, so you can't even pull the New York Times is inflating line. This is literally from their own statistics in their own newspapers. 82% of Israelis support the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza. Nearly half of the Israeli population supports killing Palestinians in Gaza. So not just like ethnically cleansing them as in like just physically removing them from the land, but like literally murdering them. Half of the country supports this. Oh, by the way, since the rest of Palestine is always left out of the conversation, from that same poll where 82% of Israelis said that they supported ethnically cleansing Palestinians from Gaza, 56% said that they were on board to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from the West Bank. So, while you might be forgetting that the rest of Palestine exists, they're certainly not, and they're pretty fixated on clearing it of Palestinians. If you're gonna lie, at least be good at it.
Very classic phrase at the end, because the majority of Zionist lies are nothing more than projection of their own crimes against humanity and against Palestinians.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Depressing yet necessary that we are informed about all of this. And I'm now going to pursue a similar theme due to a report provided with many thanks to Patrick Henningsen, who was at an event in London on Monday, where there was an announcement about a global Sumud Flotilla announcing civilian action to end the siege, basically the delivery of humanitarian aid by sea. And this is a photograph Patrick took from the event. Obviously, we've reported on these sorts of things happening in the past, and indeed how they've been interdicted by the IDF when it's been perfectly clear that there have only been civilians involved, and indeed the only goods carried on such vessels have been constituted by humanitarian aid. Nonetheless, we've got, playing on screen now, interdiction of exactly that sort that has taken place. And of course, this was discussed, but nonetheless, there is a plan to push this forward and to keep trying to deliver aid by sea. Now, the vessel that was referred to on Monday, whilst Patrick was at the event, was the Handala, humanitarian boat and crew, which was captured by the IDF, and that's indeed what we were looking at the footage of. Sorry, my mistake. Patrick also had the opportunity to talk to a number of people whilst he was at the event, and I think what's interesting, particularly bearing in mind what Vanessa has just been saying about people effectively being conditioned mentally to believe one thing or the other according to what colour, creed, nationality or religion they may belong to. Patrick spent some time talking to somebody who self-described as a Christian evangelist, and of course he recognises very much that the community that he belongs to has been, in effect, providing a totally unqualified level of support to Israel. And here we have a man speaking about his experiences and the way in which his mind was changed.
My background is an entrepreneur in financial technology. I've been in that space for a couple of decades actually, and am in a time of change in my life where I've discovered that a lot of the values and the society that I was operating in doesn't actually represent my underlying values, my family's values, and the values that I was brought up with as an evangelical Christian. And my focus at the moment is helping the church come to a point where it recognizes the words of its own scripture, its own faith, that attributes basic humanity to every human on the planet, and that focuses on mercy, justice, compassion. And when we see those values being betrayed so deeply as they are in Palestine right now, in my name, as a human, I can't have things done in my name and stay silent about it, especially when what is being done in my name is the worst genocide of our generation. Starvation inflicted on 2 million people in an open-air concentration camp with no means to support life, and where even the smallest amount of aid is blocked so much as baby formula. This is unacceptable, and to see that so much of it is being funded by organizations such as Christians United for Israel, who will support the political agendas that fund this genocide, that's distressing for me, because I grew up going to Sunday schools, living in the US, living in the UK, living in Australia. I grew up in all these places being told that Jesus loves children, being told that human life matters, being told that we are to turn the other cheek, that we're to love our enemies, we're to do good to those that hurt. These are the values that I was taught. But what I see in reality is a global church who's afraid to stand up for the values that it professes to believe. And so this is the dissonance, this is my grief personally, and this is something that I'm working through. And I want to spend some time focusing over the next few years and saying, how do we bring the church back to its roots? How do we start praying for Gaza? How do we start saying the word Gaza? How do we rescue ourselves from ourselves? Because if the status quo is allowed to continue, if we just continue in our apathy and our complicity and our silence, future generations are going to judge us. We're going to lose an entire generation of people who will reject every single message and every single word that was said by the older generation, who stood by, not only just watched this happen, but actually contributed to it through silence, through tax dollars, through political lobbying and support.
Robert Lincoln there giving a very good account of himself, and presumably by being calm and rational about it, he will be able to exert influence on those around him who have been brought up to have beliefs that run contrary to what his now are. Now, in terms of the press release from the event, there's a little bit more detail, which I will just read out to you. In terms of the intent to break the siege on Gaza, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition say that several international organisations have expressed their willingness to cooperate with the coalition to send dozens of ships to Gaza in the coming months. So we, presumably via Patrick, will be able to keep you up to speed with this. And I'm pleased to say that Patrick will be filling in the gaps and providing much more detail on that event in Friday's news. So please tune in for an update on that. Now, Sandi, I said earlier in the programme that we were going to hear more about the gunning principles and how they may be successfully deployed. And indeed, you've recently been to an event in Langport where you've learnt much more about this.
Yes, I spoke at the Hacienda in Langport in Somerset, and it was the actual, celebrating freedom of speech event that we've been not been able to put on for a very long time, because basically the town council where I live don't like who I work for and don't like what I do, so that I've been banned. But anyway, we managed to do it because it's private land, lovely off-grid community there. It's run as a CIC, and it was very well attended with people eager to take action. I really feel that people are at the stage now where they're understanding how important it is to act. When there's tyranny going on in your own country, nuanced as it is still tyranny. Other speakers were Clive de Carle, he was speaking on health and well-being, and Richard Vobes, who, as usual, lightened up the day, making everyone laugh. And he promoted his soon-to-be-launched fictional book, Biggleswick, which is a fictional town that stood up against the global tyranny. So all of that was very, very nice. My talk focused on the planned gradual destruction of the UK over decades under a systematic land grab. Various means. I spoke of the destruction of farming and food sovereignty in the UK, net zero legislation with environmental and social governance contracts and biodiversity net gain contracts on land, corporate buyout of common land, the global framework law over local national sovereignty, which is going on, the technocratic governance over democracy, the World Heritage status worldwide, which is bringing tourism versus natural local habitat. So we've got a lot going on here. The talk also encompassed the latest plans for devolution under the English Devolution and Communities Empowerment Act, which is due to go through Parliament after the summer recess, which is anything but empowerment for the people. It's exactly the reverse. So the full talk will be up on my website soon, sandiadams.uk. So this is me speaking a little bit about devolution, if we could play that reel.
Net zero restrictions such as more ULEZ, more LTNs, more 15-minute cities, 20-mile-an-hour zones, increased surveillance. This is in these big regions that we've got, because what they intend to do is dissolve Parliament. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but you can see this all in the Cities and Communities Act of 2016. Look it up. I've got a picture of it here. And it was something that, it was an act that went through in 2016, laying out the powers of these, what they call directly elected mayors, covenant of smart city mayors. So what they'll do is they'll transfer the power of these mayors from Westminster, that will become powerless, onto these covenant of smart city mayors. So eventually you'll have a smart city mayor in each region, and there'll be only 8 regions in the UK, and it's an exact copy of Tony Blair's federal England that he put up in 1997, which failed. So it's the same map, and I'll show you a picture of that map in a minute. So what will happen now in Somerset? We joined up with I think it was Sedgemoor Council and Mendip, and became unitary, and now they're joining up with, they've got a plan to join up with, so Somerset will join with Dorset and Wiltshire and become a region, and they're going to call it the Heart of Wessex. Now, all of these old-fashioned names for these regions were the same ones that Tony Blair had in 1997 for his map of federal England to be executed by 2020. So if you imagine what Sadiq Khan is in London, you will have a mini Sadiq Khan in every region, and their only focus is on net zero.
So thank you. That it was just a short clip really about devolution and what what we have coming. Now, Ian Jarvis came and he gave us a very comprehensive talk on the gunning principles and how, in his view, they could well be our salvation. And by reverse engineering the infrastructure for the digital prisons that are being created for us, I can't stress enough how powerful these principles are. They overturned a low-traffic neighbourhood in West Dulwich recently, and all the technology had to come out, and the fines have been paid back to the people, and the council have to pay the court costs. So it's an enormous win, really. It was won without judicial review because it's already in case law from 1984. So it went straight to the High Court and was won on the fact that the consultation procedure had been inadequate. Therein lies the key. It's about consultation procedures. So I'd like to just play Ian Jarvis summing up the power of the gunning principles in this little clip where he says it's the salvation of the UK.
I just want to say thank you for all your work you've been doing for all those years, and I think the gunning principles are really powerful, aren't they, if you use them correctly?
I think the gunning principles could be part of our salvation.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Yeah, and he did a really good talk, and I've got the gist of the gunning principles here. And so the first one is the consultation must be at a time when proposals are still at a formative stage. This means the decision has not already been made and there's still genuine opportunity to influence the outcome. And number two, sufficient reasons must be put forward for the proposal to allow for intelligent consideration and response. The public or stakeholders must be given enough information to understand the issue and respond meaningfully. Number three, adequate time must be given for consideration and response. The consultation process must allow enough time for people to absorb the information, reflect, and submit their views. And number four, there's only four of them, the product of consultation must be conscientiously taken into account by the decision makers. Responses received during the consultation must be considered with an open mind before the final decision is made. Now, in my view, most of these consultations that are going on throughout the UK, whether it's on 5G towers, 15-minute cities, net zero, low emission zones, whatever, none of this is being done. And this is where it has to be challenged.
It absolutely does. And now at least we do know more about how, certainly a theme that we will persist with. Thank you very much indeed, Sandi. Now, to continue on a vaguely related theme, I'm going to use the upcoming state visit and indeed the press conference I referred to earlier between Trump and Starmer as a vehicle with which to highlight the absurdity of many of the policies concerning land use and environmental schemes and all the rest of it. But this is what the American president had to say about the inheritance tax that's to be imposed upon farmers. And of course, just before we watch the clip, I should remind you that the projection was that it would yield £500 million in a year, which is as much as the National Health Service spends in one day. So we'll have a look at this clip now.
We've got to fix that problem. We can't simply live with that problem. So it's a very different situation.
Well, we ended the estate tax. There is no estate tax on farmers. So when a parent leaves their farm, because again, a lot of these farms, they don't make a lot of money, but it's a way of life, and they love their way of life, and they love that dirt. That dirt is the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. They love it. I mean, they're farmers. They love doing it. They don't know how to do anything else, but they don't want to do anything else. I speak to farmers. I say, would you like to live in my penthouse in Manhattan? It's the most beautiful. No, sir, I want this farm. And what happens is, we were losing a lot of people to suicide. They'd borrow money to pay the estate tax, and they were not able to pay it. And some banks are ruthless; they wouldn't do anything, and they would end up committing suicide. We have totally ended the estate tax in those situations, so there's no estate tax. So when a parent leaves the farm to the kids, they don't have to worry about their local, possibly unfriendly banker coming in and stealing their farm.
So I think the important thing to pull out there is that this is just being discussed in the mainstream at that level, not necessarily the fact that Trump is either right or wrong, but at least it is being discussed. And on that note, I have pulled out a piece from Spiked in which Matt Ridley, the Times columnist, has been speaking about net zero, saying it could destroy civilization. Of course, he's perhaps echoing what Tony Blair is saying to do with the cost, but he's also making exactly the point that despite these apocalyptic predictions, in actual fact, doesn't seem to be coming to pass. And he described Ed Miliband's terrifying vision of climate change by saying there are a few more days when you might have to cut your lawn, but a few less days when you might have to heat your house. And it did not sound very frightening, frankly. And I think it would be fair to say that he is absolutely onto something there, and I reinforce the point that it's just important this is discussed in the mainstream. Now, returning to Trump and Starmer, the other area, of course, which is highly contentious, is the renewable power agenda. And indeed, this is what Trump had to say about wind.
Wind is a disaster.
But in Scotland and across the UK, wind farms are...
I know, it's a shame. It's not his fault.
Well,
I used to tell Alex Salmon.
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister, and will you speak to the First
Minister? All I can do is give my wind. Look, wind is the most expensive form of energy, and it destroys the beauty of your fields and your plains and your waterways. And look out there. There's no windmills. But if you look in another direction, you see windmills. When we go to Aberdeen, you'll see some of the ugliest windmills you've ever seen. They're the height of a 50-story building. And you can take 1,000 times more energy out of a hole in the ground this big. This big. It's called oil and gas. And you have it there, the North Sea. This big, that nobody would even see. You can take 1,000 times more power because the wind is intermittent, it doesn't work, it's extremely expensive. All the windmills are made in China. They used to be Germany and China, now they're mostly in China. They all come out of China. They say that the blades, which are carbon fiber, you can't bury. Oh, okay, you can't bury. What are you gonna do, dump them in the ocean someplace? Because they only last a certain period of time. And remember, a windmill has a life of 8 years, especially when they're out in the salty sea and they start to rot and to rust. You have to replace them. It's very hard to replace them. Wind needs massive subsidy. And you are paying in Scotland and in UK and all over the place where they have them, massive subsidies to have these ugly monsters all over the place.
It's very hard to disagree with anything that he says there, and one can't help but wonder how the conversation will go when it comes up at dinner with the King and Queen during this visit. But the points he makes specifically about subsidy and the destruction of the natural environment do seem to reinforce the sense of panic at trying to get all this stuff over the line before everybody realises what's going on. And we've had a recent announcement about incentives for buying electric vehicles and indeed an upgrade apparently of 27% of charging points for all the electric vehicles that the government's absolutely desperate for people to buy. Trump, having referred to Truth Social earlier in the censorship clip, has been, again, outspoken and saying, with regard to oil, that a vast fortune is to be made for the UK and far lower energy costs for the people. So I'm not predicating this by saying that we need to hang on his every word, but I think the point to take away from this is that this is being broadcast on the mainstream. People will be hearing about this, and one would hope that public opinion can be swayed by these sorts of outbursts and indeed transmissions of relatively reliable information. Now, on that note, we're going to end the programme on what we consider to be a high. We hope you all agree, and we're going to go to Sandi now for a little bit of an update from Manchester.
Yes, there was a bit of a win in Manchester where the clean own saga finally was put to bed as more than 1,300 CAS, it's clear air zone signs, were actually ditched and taken down, marking the end of the controversial scheme. It was the project faced opposition because when these signs were installed, local businesses began to really realise the financial implications. And that is what happened. That was the main driver of this, was the local businesses all got together and said, look, we're going to lose our businesses. And so even Andy Burnham, who is a very, very green mayor in Manchester, Greater Manchester, he agreed, and he said that the motorists should not be charged. They're still keeping some of the targets there for clean, air emissions and what have you, clean emissions, but they are not going to charge motorists. All the fines are going to go, which is a huge win. The scheme reportedly cost more than 100 million, including installation contracts and enforcement measures, even as it was never became active. So they're still spending 86 million on it, but it means that the people won't be charged fines. So it's a partial win, but it's a win nevertheless, and it's part way to see that people are beginning to question really the implications and the financial implications of net zero.
Indeed. Sandi, thank you very much indeed. And it's only with that pressure being applied continually that these sorts of things are possible in the first place. Now, that brings the programme to a close. But before we go, don't forget, of course, that we've got John Lachlan talking to Germ tonight at 7 o'clock. Ben will be speaking with Morgoth, England, Your England, tomorrow at 1 p.m. And in extra, we've got Katy-Jo Murfin joining us to talk about the Hope Freedom event. So with many thanks to Vanessa, Carl, Mike and Sandi for joining me. We will look forward to seeing you on the news on Friday. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.